She called airport security on a black dad traveling with his kids, but when officers arrived, they recognized him instantly because he's one of their own. And what happened next ended her entire HOA career. The Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport was alive with holiday chaos. Rolling suitcases, loudspeakers blaring delays, and families rushing through TSA checkpoints. In the middle of it all stood Marcus Hill, a calm black father traveling with his two kids, Ava and Ethan. This was their first trip to Europe, and the excitement in their voices was contagious. Everything was smooth until she noticed them. Linda Porter, the tall, sharp-tongued HOA chairwoman from Marcus's neighborhood, froze when she spotted the family. She had made Marcus's life miserable from the day he moved into community. Complaint about his non-regulation holiday lights, warnings about his parking angle, and even a note about his kids playing too loudly. Now she stared at him with the same judgmental glare. Marcus knelt to tie Ethan's shoelace. Linda stepped closer like a detective on a mission. "Are these your kids?" she asked bluntly. Marcus stood up slowly. "Yes. Can I help you with something?" Linda didn't answer. She spun around and marched away, clutching her phone. Ava tugged her father's hand. "Daddy, why did she look at us like that?" Marcus forced a smile. "Some people look for reasons to be unhappy. But we're going to have a great trip. Let's head to security." But behind them, Linda was already dialing airport security, convinced she had uncovered a crime. Just then, the senior security supervisor arrived, Officer Ramirez, a man whose presence alone could silence an entire terminal. He was tall, composed, and carried himself with the kind of authority that only came from decades of experience scanning crowds, detecting lies, and handling real emergencies, not the imagined ones cooked up by overzealous HOA presidents. He approached with steady steps, eyes taking in the scene, Marcus standing calmly beside his frightened children, two TSA officers looking mildly embarrassed, and then Linda, arms stiff, chest puffed, wearing an expression of someone who believed she had just cracked a national threat wide open. Ramirez paused, glancing first at Marcus, then at Linda, before speaking. "Mr. Hill," he said, his tone respectful, almost apologetic. "Sorry for the inconvenience." The entire atmosphere shifted. Linda's eyes widened so dramatically it was almost comedic. "Wait, you know him," she blurted out, as if the universe had betrayed her. Ramirez nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. And before you embarrass yourself further, allow me to explain." Linda folded her arms across her chest, lifting her chin proudly, convinced, delusionally, that whatever he was about to say would validate her paranoia. She imagined Ramirez telling her she had sharp instincts, or that she had saved lives today. But the truth came like a slap that echoed across the terminal. "Mr. Hill is an FBI agent, ma'am," Ramirez said clearly, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "He works in interstate trafficking investigations. We've partnered with him during security briefings. He's one of the most vetted individuals to walk through this airport." Linda's mouth fell open, her confidence evaporating as though someone had flipped a switch. Her arms dropped to her sides. The color drained from her face. It was as if every self-appointed badge of authority she believed she held had been ripped away. Marcus crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow, letting a small, tired smile form. "Try to tell you I'm just taking my kids on vacation," he said, his voice calm but edged with the frustration of someone forced to justify his existence one too many times. Officer Ramirez crouched slightly to look at the children, softening his voice. "These kids," he said warmly, "are safer with him than with any of us." Ava nodded shyly, still shaken, and Ethan leaned closer to his father for reassurance. Around them, passengers who had been watching began whispering loudly enough for Linda to hear every word. "That woman is unbelievable," one man muttered. "She really called security on an FBI officer?" Another scoffed. Someone near the stanchions added, "Profiling at its finest." A woman with a stroller simply shook her head, glaring at Linda like she was a villain in a bad reality show. With every whisper, every stare, Linda's cheeks burned hotter and hotter until her entire face turned a deep shade of red. Part humiliation, part anger, part the realization that the world was not on her side. "But he didn't look like," she began, then stopped herself too late. The unfinished sentence hung in the air like smoke, thick and ugly. Everyone heard the implication. Everyone saw the truth she had been trying to hide behind false concern. Her prejudice was exposed in a single half-formed sentence. Marcus inhaled deeply, not in anger, but in exhaustion, the kind that comes from dealing with the same story in different costumes throughout life. He shook his head slowly and said, "You judge me because of how I look, not because of anything I did." His words were simple but carried the weight of generations. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. Even the airport announcements seemed to pause. And in that stillness, the entire terminal agreed. Linda wasn't protecting anyone. She wasn't being vigilant. She wasn't being cautious. She was profiling, assuming, accusing, and weaponizing her position as HOA president as though it gave her authority over strangers' lives. In that moment, everyone could see exactly who the real problem was. And it wasn't Marcus. By now, a crowd had formed around the security checkpoint, buzzing with confusion, irritation, and a growing sense of disbelief. People pulled out their phones, recording every second as Linda, now red-faced and trembling with self-righteous fury, continued to insist she had done the right thing. A woman in line folded her arms and stepped forward. "You wasted security time," she yelled. Another man said, "Lady, they're just a family trying to travel. What's wrong with you?" Someone else chimed in, "Mind your business for once." The entire terminal seemed to pulse with frustration as whispers rippled through the onlookers. Officer Ramirez, still calm but now visibly annoyed, turned to Linda with a firmness that cut through the noise. "Ma'am," he said, "you filed a false emergency report. That is a chargeable offense." The words hit her harder than a shout. Linda's eyes stretched wide, her jaw dropping as if she couldn't believe the universe had spun this far out of her control. "Me?" she shrieked, pointing dramatically at her own chest. "I was protecting those kids. I was doing the right thing." Her voice cracked, desperation leaking through the bravado. Ramirez didn't flinch. "No," he replied, his tone sharpening like a closing door. "You harassed an innocent family, and you disrupted airport operations. That is not doing the right thing. That is creating chaos." As he gestured toward two approaching officers, Linda stumbled backward. "No, don't touch me," she protested as they reached for her arms. "I'm the HOA president. I run my community." Her declaration echoed to the terminal, but instead of commanding respect, it only drew snickers and mutters from the crowd. Marcus, standing with Ava and Ethan safely behind him, raised an eyebrow with a calm, almost amused expression. "Not this one," he said under his breath, and several passengers nodded in agreement. The officers gently but firmly took her by the wrists and began to secure handcuffs around them. Cameras flashed, phones tilted in for closer shots, and the scene spiraled into a moment she would never live down. Linda twisted, trying to break free, her voice rising into a high-pitched panic. "You're all making a mistake. He could be dangerous. You don't know what he's capable of," she cried, still clinging to the narrative she had built in her head. Officer Ramirez didn't even stop walking as he responded, "Ma'am, he teaches us how to spot dangerous people." The irony of the statement hung in the air like a final verdict. Linda froze mid-struggle. The truth hit her so hard it seemed to deflate her entire body. The realization that she, so proud of her supposed instincts, her authority, her judgment, had targeted an innocent father, an FBI agent no less, left her visibly shaken. The airport crowd watched as her confidence crumbled. A mother holding a toddler shook her head. "Some people just can't admit when they're wrong." A businessman muttered, "She picked the wrong guy today." Even the children, still holding on to Marcus's arms, looked on as if witnessing a lesson about the world unfolding right in front of them. And as Linda was escorted away, her protest reduced to incoherent muttering, the terminal slowly returned to motion. The line shuffled forward. The loudspeaker announced boarding for another flight. Life continued. But the look on Linda's face, the shock, the humiliation, the undeniable irony, would stay in the memories of everyone who saw it, a reminder that sometimes the danger isn't the person you fear, but the assumptions you choose to believe. After Linda was finally escorted away, Still sputtering objections no one believed anymore. The tension in the terminal slowly began to dissolve. TSA officers gathered themselves, whispered among each other, and then personally guided Marcus and his children toward a separate, cleared security lane. The crowd parted for them, some out of respect, some out of guilt for having assumed the worst during the commotion. Officer Ramirez walked beside Marcus, his expression a mix of frustration, apology, and professional embarrassment. "Mr. Hill," he said in a low voice, "we're genuinely sorry about this. It should never have escalated that way." Marcus let out a long breath, one he'd been holding since the moment those officers first approached him. "I get it," he replied calmly. "You were doing your job. But promise me something. Try to treat everyone with the same respect you treated me after you recognized me. Not everyone who gets profiled has someone who can vouch for them." Ramirez paused, absorbing the weight of the comment, and nodded with a seriousness that suggested he meant it. "You have my word." Once they cleared the expedited screening and stepped back into main concourse, the air felt lighter, like the storm had passed. Ava clung to her father's arm, her small face wrinkled in confusion and hurt. "Dad, that woman was really mean," she said softly. Marcus scooped her closer, kissing her forehead. "Some people let fear control them," he told her gently. "Some let assumptions guide their actions. But we rise above it. That's what makes us stronger." Ethan, still processing everything, tugged at Marcus's hand. "And we're still going on vacation, right?" he asked hopefully, like the whole world depended on that answer. Marcus burst into a warm, grounding laugh, the kind that reassured both kids instantly. "You bet we are. Nothing is ruining this trip." As the family made their way toward the gate, people they passed offered small gestures of solidarity. A nod, a smile, a quiet, "Sorry you had to go through that," or "Thank you for your service." Some passengers looked ashamed, realizing they had stood by and watched judgment unfold without stepping in. Others simply admired Marcus's composure, whispering things like, "He handled that better than most would have." When boarding began, the gate agent gave Marcus a respectful smile and said, just loud enough for him to hear, "Glad everything worked out, sir." The kids hurried ahead, excited again, their earlier fears slowly dissolving under the promise of airplane snacks and window seats. Marcus followed behind them, a protective but peaceful presence, relieved the ordeal was finally in the past. And as for Linda, well, her day was far from over. By the time the plane taxied toward the runway, the videos of her meltdown were already spreading online. Clips of her yelling, "I'm the HOA president," were being memed, stitched, slowed down, and captioned with every sarcastic comment imaginable. Her name wasn't trending yet, but HOA Karen at the airport certainly was. Back in her neighborhood, her HOA board wasted no time. Embarrassed, furious, and terrified of becoming the next viral laughingstock, they held an emergency meeting. Screenshots of videos were reviewed. Complaints from neighbors resurfaced, and within hours, Linda was unanimously removed as president. The irony was harsh but poetic. She had tried to exert authority in a place where she had none, and it cost the authority she once had. Justice served on every level.